Now I'm going to tell you something that no one else will. What did people eat in the Victorian era? Forget everything you've seen in costume dramas about the Victorian era. Lavish banquets and elegant tea parties were only one tiny side of the coin. For millions of people, food was not a pleasure, but a daily struggle for survival, full of dangers you would never even suspect. It was an era of incredible contrasts, where luxury coexisted with unimaginable poverty. The food on the table could tell you more about a person than their clothes or speech. It was a marker of status, a source of comfort, and often a hidden threat. Watch the video to the end to find out why white bread could be more dangerous than a street fight, and how a common can of food changed the world forever. What lies behind the beautiful picture of Victorian London will forever change your perception of this era. In the summer of 1858, the city was engulfed by the Great Stink. The River Thames, which had turned into an open sewer, emitted such a stench that Parliament was forced to suspend its sessions. This event was directly related to what ended up on the plates of the city's residents. Despite its obvious contamination, water from the Thames was still used for drinking and cooking, especially in poor neighborhoods. Water companies took water directly from the river, along with all its waste. Brewers claimed that the boiling process used in brewing beer made the water safe. Therefore, for many, ale and porter were not just drinks, but a safer alternative to water. This led to even workers starting their day with a mug of beer. Fish caught in the Thames was considered food for the poor. It was cheap, but it carried all the riches of river water. Street fishmongers often masked the stale smell with vinegar and spices. The problem was not limited to water alone. The streets of cities were covered with horse manure and garbage. This dirt easily found its way into basements where food was stored and onto open market stalls. Food producers often did not care about the cleanliness of the water sources used in production. Milk was diluted with water from the nearest tap or even a ditch. This was a common practice to increase profits. This unsanitary condition was an invisible ingredient in the diet of most Victorians. They may not have known about bacteria, but they constantly faced its consequences. Diseases transmitted through water and food were one of the main causes of high mortality. The Great Stink eventually forced the authorities to build a modern sewer system. But until then, millions of people lived in conditions that seem unthinkable today. Their food was a reflection of this dirty reality. The Victorian era is often romanticized, but the truth about its culinary world is far from ideal. It was a daily game of roulette with one's health. The contrast between the elegant facades and the dirty underside was enormous. I'm very interested to hear your point of view. What do you think about such a stark contrast between the commonly accepted image of the era and its realities? Write about it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Are you ready to learn the truth about how deep the gap between rich and poor Victorians really was? This gap was most evident at their dinner tables. The kitchens of the aristocracy and the working class existed as if in parallel universes. Dinner in a wealthy home was a veritable theatrical performance. It could consist of 10 or even 15 courses, each of which was a work of culinary art. The goal was not simply to feed guests, but to impress them with abundance and refinement. It all started with soups with two types served at once, light and dark. This was followed by fish dishes from fried salmon to oysters. Then it was time for meat, roast beef, lamb, game, and poultry. Each meat dish was served with complex sauces and a variety of side dishes. Vegetables, which were a luxury for the poor, were abundant here. The feast ended with complex desserts, puddings, cakes, and fresh fruit brought from abroad. At the same time, the dinner of an ordinary working family looked completely different. The basis of their diet was bread. It was the cheapest and most accessible source of calories. The family added whatever little they could afford to the bread. Most often it was potatoes, turnips, or cabbage. Meat appeared on the table extremely rarely, perhaps once a week in the form of a small piece of bacon or cheap offal. A common dish was soup made from whatever could be found. Bones, vegetable scraps, and a little grain were used. Such food was not very nutritious, but it allowed people to warm up and fill their stomachs. If a poor person bought ready-made food, it was the cheapest street food. For example, a bowl of pea soup or a pie with questionable filling. No one thought about the quality of such products. The main thing was the price. Even drinks emphasized this difference. While the rich drank expensive French wines and champagne, the poor were content with the cheapest beer or diluted gin. Tea was also a luxury for them, so they often drank already brewed and dried tea leaves. This difference in diet directly affected health and life expectancy. The rich suffered from obesity and gout, while the poor suffered from exhaustion and vitamin deficiency. Food was the most obvious indicator of social inequality. But what if I told you that even the rich were risking their health every day without knowing it? In the next chapter, we'll reveal the shocking truth about what was really hidden in the products on Victorian store shelves. I will reveal the most closely guarded secret of Victorian merchants, which they hid for decades. In their pursuit of profit, they resorted to incredible tricks, turning ordinary products into dangerous mixtures. The era of Queen Victoria was the golden age of food adulteration. Let's start with the most important product, bread. To make it whiter and more appealing to buyers, bakers mixed alum, a chemical compound of aluminum, into the flour. This not only bleached low-quality flour, but also allowed it to absorb more water, increasing the weight of the loaf. Milk was almost never sold in its pure form. It was shamelessly diluted with water, and chalk or crushed gypsum was added to restore the drink's white color. Sometimes an emulsion made from sheep's brains was added on top to create the appearance of cream. The sweets and candies that Victorians loved so much were especially dangerous. Bright colors were achieved through the use of toxic dyes. Green was obtained using copper arsenite, red using mercury sulfide, and yellow using lead chromate. Even tea contained unexpected additives. Merchants mixed expensive tea leaves with used tea leaves, which they bought from wealthy households, and then dyed and dried them. Sometimes they added blackthorn leaves or even sawdust treated with iron oxide for color. Cheese was often colored with cinnabar or red lead to give it an appetizing orange hue. Both of these dyes contained mercury and lead. Mashed potatoes could be added to cheap varieties of cheese to increase their weight. Pickled vegetables, such as pickles, had to have a beautiful green color. To achieve this, manufacturers boiled them in copper vats or added copper acetate. This gave the cucumbers a bright emerald hue, but saturated them with a toxic compound. Coffee was also subject to adulteration. Ground coffee was often mixed with chicory, roasted peas, carrots, or even oak bark. All of this was roasted and ground to imitate the real product. What if I showed you a time machine that transported Victorians into the future? That machine was the ordinary tin can. The invention of canning was one of the quietest but most significant revolutions of the 19th century, forever changing the way we think about food. Before the advent of canned food, preserving food was a difficult task. People relied on salting, smoking, drying, and dehydrating. These methods were effective, but they greatly altered the taste and texture of the food and required a lot of time and labor. The idea of sealing food in containers and heating it to destroy germs originated in the Napoleonic era. However, fragile glass jars were initially used for this purpose. The real breakthrough came when glass was replaced by durable and lightweight tin plate. Canning was a labor-intensive process. Workers cut and soldered the cans by hand, leaving a small opening. The cans were filled with food through this opening, then sealed and sent to boiling water for sterilization. At first, canned food was an expensive treat, available only to the rich. It was considered a novelty and was often served at dinner parties to surprise guests. The cans were so sturdy that they could only be opened with a hammer and chisel. The situation changed when canned food became a key element in supplying the Army and Navy. Sailors and soldiers gained access to varied and nutritious food during long voyages. This significantly improved their health and combat effectiveness. The real boom in canning came in the second half of the century, when the process became more automated and prices fell. Canned food became accessible to the middle class. Housewives were able to cook exotic dishes at any time of the year. Canned soups, vegetables, meat, and fish filled store shelves. It was incredibly convenient. No need to peel, cut, or cook for a long time. By opening a can, you could quickly prepare a full meal. Canned food also stimulated geographical discoveries and colonization. Travelers and explorers could take food supplies with them that would not spoil for months. This allowed them to go on long expeditions to the most remote corners of the planet. However, early canned food had a dark side. Sometimes solder containing lead was used to seal the cans. If the solder got inside, it could poison the contents, leading to tragic consequences. The streets of Victorian cities were not just a place to walk, but a huge, noisy market. You could buy anything here, and food was no exception. For many poor people, street vendors were the main, and sometimes the only opportunity to eat. One of the most popular street foods was meat pies. They were sold from portable trays equipped with a small brazier to keep them warm. The fillings varied greatly, from beef and kidneys to cheaper offal. The quality of these pies was a lottery. Unscrupulous vendors could use any meat they could get their hands on cheaply for the filling. Nevertheless, a hot filling pie was an affordable and calorie-rich meal for the working class. Another street food hit was oysters. Today they are considered a delicacy, but in the Victorian era, oysters were incredibly cheap and plentiful. They were sold on every corner, with the shells opened right in front of the buyer. Oysters were eaten raw, sprinkled with vinegar and pepper. It was a quick and protein-rich snack that even the poorest dock worker could afford. Their popularity was so great that the oyster beds around Britain were almost completely depleted. For seafood lovers, boiled or pickled mussels and shrimp were also available. They were sold in small bowls seasoned with vinegar. It was a salty and spicy treat, perfect with a mug of ale. Eels held a special place in street cuisine. They were prepared in various ways, but the most popular option was jellied eels. Pieces of fish were boiled in a spicy broth, which then solidified into jelly. Potatoes were another king of street food. Hot baked potatoes were sold from trays, especially during the cold season. They were cut open and served with butter and salt, providing a simple but filling and warming meal. Ginger ale was the drink of choice on the streets. Sold in clay bottles, it was a refreshing and non-alcoholic alternative to beer. Lemonade and various fruit syrups diluted with water were also popular. What experts on the Victorian era don't talk about is the central role of bread in people's lives. It was not just a product, but the basis of nutrition, a measure of prosperity, and even a cause of social unrest. For the vast majority of the population, bread was the main source of calories. There was a clear distinction between white and brown bread. White bread, baked from finely ground and refined wheat flour, was a symbol of status and wealth. Only the upper and middle classes could afford it. The working class and the poor ate dark bread. It was baked from coarsely ground flour, often mixed with rye, barley, or even peas. Such bread was cheaper but considered less prestigious. The price of bread was one of the most important economic indicators. Any increase in prices due to crop failure or speculation could lead to hunger riots. The government closely monitored the grain market, understanding its social significance. For many families, bread accounted for up to half of all food expenses. A loaf of bread and a little tea were often the only dinner. Children went to school after eating only a piece of stale bread for breakfast. Bread was not only a dish in itself, but also the basis for many others. It was dipped in soup to make it more filling. A piece of bread was spread with a little fat or molasses. This was a typical worker's sandwich. A popular dish was the so-called bread pudding. It was made from stale bread leftovers, which were soaked in water or milk. A little sugar and fat were added, and then it was baked. It was an economical way to use every last bit. In rural areas, many families baked their own bread in communal or home ovens. In cities, however, most people bought bread from bakers. This led to the growth of large bakeries that produced bread on an industrial scale. As we already know, the quality of this bread was questionable. In addition to alum, bakers could add mashed potatoes or even gypsum to the flour to increase its weight. Buying bread was always a risk. Tea arrived in England long before Queen Victoria, but it was during her reign that it transformed from an expensive drink for aristocrats into a national obsession. It became an integral part of British culture, a ritual observed in all walks of life. This drink warmed, invigorated, and united people. Initially, tea was incredibly expensive and only available to the wealthiest. It was stored in special lockable tea caddies to prevent servants from stealing it. Tea plantations in India and Ceylon, which developed in the 19th century, made it more affordable. Lower taxes on tea eventually made it a drink for everyone. Working families could afford to buy small amounts of cheap tea. It became an important part of their diet, providing a warm and stimulating drink. High society developed the famous tradition of 5 o'clock tea, or afternoon tea. It is believed to have been introduced by the Duchess of Bedford as a snack between lunch and a late dinner. This tradition quickly became a fashionable social ritual. For aristocrats, it was an exquisite event. Tea was served in delicate porcelain cups along with a tiered stand laden with treats. The bottom tier held small sandwiches, the middle tier held scones with jam and cream, and the top tier held cakes and pastries. The middle class enthusiastically adopted this tradition, albeit in a more modest form. For them, it was a way to demonstrate their respectability. Housewives baked cupcakes and cookies for tea and invited their friends over. The working class had its own version of tea drinking, known as high tea. It was not a light snack, but a full early dinner, which took place around 6 in the evening when the head of the family returned from work. It was more substantial and filling. Strong, sweet tea was served at the table. It was accompanied by large pieces of bread with butter, as well as some kind of hot dish. This could be a meat pie, sausages, or a piece of fish. The heart of any wealthy Victorian home was the kitchen. It was located in the basement or semi-basement, away from the eyes of the owners and their guests. It was a separate world with its own strict hierarchy and laws, where heat, steam, and hard work reigned supreme. The center of this world was a huge cast iron stove. This marvel of engineering was fueled by coal and required constant attention. In the morning, it had to be lit, and during the day, the right temperature had to be maintained by adding coal and cleaning the ashes. The stove was multifunctional. Several dishes could be cooked simultaneously in pots and pans on its flat surface. Built-in ovens allowed bread and pies to be baked and large pieces of meat to be roasted. In addition to the stove, there were many other devices in the kitchen. Mechanical meat grinders, apple peelers, jelly presses. All of these were supposed to make work easier, but required considerable physical strength. There were no refrigerators, so ice boxes were used to store perishable foods. Cabinets in which large blocks of ice were stored. There was a strict hierarchy in the kitchen. At the top was the cook, who was the real manager. She made the menu, did the shopping, supervised the whole process, and was responsible for the most complicated dishes. She had assistants in dishwashers working under her. At the bottom of the hierarchy was the dishwashing girl. Her job was the dirtiest and hardest. She washed mountains of dishes, cleaned vegetables, and did the most menial work. The working day in the kitchen began long before dawn and ended late at night. The servants worked without days off, getting one day off a month if they were lucky. Working conditions were difficult. The kitchen was always hot, stuffy, and noisy. Despite the hard work, the position of cook in a wealthy household was prestigious. A good cook was highly valued and received a decent salary. The reputation of the entire household depended on her skills. The Industrial Revolution gave Victorian England a dense network of railways. Trains carrying coal and goods also became arteries, through which a flood of fresh produce poured into cities. This revolutionized the diets of millions of people. Before the era of railways, cities depended on food produced in their immediate vicinity. Food was seasonal and local. Delivering perishable goods over long distances was virtually impossible. Trains changed everything. Now fresh milk from the countryside could be delivered to London in just a few hours, rather than days. This gave city dwellers access to a higher quality and safer product. Fish, which had previously only been available fresh to coastal residents, could now be quickly delivered to the interior of the country. Special refrigerated trains loaded with ice carried the catch from the coast to large cities. Herring, cod, and flounder became common foods for many city dwellers. Farmers were able to sell their produce in huge city markets. Fresh vegetables, fruit, meat, and poultry from remote counties became available in London, Manchester, and Birmingham. This greatly diversified the diet of the middle class. Railways contributed to the growth of large food companies. Firms producing biscuits, jams, or sauces could now sell their products throughout the country. This led to the emergence of the first national brands. Food imports also expanded. Thanks to the combination of steamships and trains, exotic fruits such as oranges and bananas began to appear on store shelves. Although they were still expensive, their availability was growing. For farmers, this meant new opportunities and a stable income. They were no longer tied to the local market. The railroad opened up the whole country to them. The Victorian era was a time not only of industrial growth, but also of serious social problems. One of the most acute was alcoholism, which was particularly prevalent in poor urban neighborhoods. Cheap gin, dubbed Mother's Ruin, destroyed families and lives. Pubs were the center of social life for the working class. This is where men gathered after a hard day at the factory or the docks. A pint of beer or a shot of gin was a way to relax, forget about their troubles, and socialize with friends. However, this escape from reality often went too far. Many workers spent a significant portion of their meager earnings on alcohol. This left their families without a means of subsistence. In response to this problem, a powerful temperance movement emerged in society. Its participants, often motivated by religious beliefs, called for a complete rejection of alcohol. They saw it as the root of all social ills: poverty, crime, and moral decay. The temperance movement used a variety of methods to promote its cause. They organized lectures, marches, and rallies. Brochures and pamphlets were distributed, vividly demonstrating the terrible consequences of drunkenness. Activists created alternatives to pubs. Temperance coffee shops and cocoa houses began to open across the country. In these establishments, you could spend time in a decent environment, drink a non-alcoholic beverage, read a newspaper, or play chess. Cocoa houses, promoted by philanthropists such as the Cadbury family, became particularly popular. They offered a cheap and nutritious drink that was intended to be a healthy substitute for alcohol. These establishments often became centers of social life for teetotalers. We have taken a journey into the complex and contradictory world of Victorian cuisine. From poisoned bread and adulterated milk to revolutionary canned foods and ritual tea parties. Food in this era was a mirror reflecting all the achievements, problems, and contrasts of society. Behind the facade of imperial grandeur and industrial progress lay a daily struggle for survival. Stories about what Victorians ate teach us to appreciate the simple things we take for granted today: clean water, safe food, and access to a variety of foods. What other secrets of history would you like to uncover? Suggest topics for future videos that you would like to see on our channel in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on new, exciting investigations.